You're listening to the Second Look podcast, where we take a closer look at what we're learning each Sunday at Connection Church to help you grow in your walk with Christ. Here are your hosts, Pastor Joe Terreri and Pastor Dan DeRochers.
Welcome to The Second Look. My name is Dan.
And I'm Joe.
And we're here talking about the Christmas message we need, but may not want.
Yes.
But first, hi, Joe.
Good morning, Dan.
Good morning. Joe, a busy weekend of ministry has just ended.
At Connection Church.
At Connection Church, we had our Free Photos with Santa event on Saturday. You know, Santa Claus, the classic church figure.
Yes. Oh, man.
But what an incredible time that we got to welcome our community in and minister to them.
It was such a blessing, our Free Photos with Santa event. I was just so blessed by it. I was blessed by the people in our church who were just giving of themselves. I mean, we said the event went from 10 until noon, and the event really went from about 9 until 1:30. I was blessed by the turnout. So many folks we got to interact with who are not part of our church family, never stepped foot inside of our church. And there's just this sense in my own heart, like, I wish people could just see, like, because sometimes, you know, we don't get a lot of criticism, Dan. We really don't. But around our Santa event, we do get some light outside criticism from people who aren't connected to our church mostly. And I think people who are part of our church understand the heart of what we're trying to do.
Right.
But I just thought, what an awesome thing that we get to welcome these families. And it's not a celebration of Santa Claus. It's an opportunity to love.
That's right.
And, you know, Dan, not to let the cat out of the bag, but I don't think there's any 8-year-olds listening to the podcast. Santa Claus is actually played by your mom and dad.
Yes.
And they for 4 hours, they took pictures with people. And I think about, wow, your parents are so kind and so genuine and so good with the kids. And I think, you know, just the fact that these little ones get to interact with such warm people who had exceptional attitudes for 4 hours as kids were climbing all over them, as they smiled for over 1,200 pictures. I just like, man, like there is just something beautiful about this day. And, you know, and I just want everyone to know, we got to invite every single family to our Christmas Eve service because the goal is for people to know Jesus and to love in Jesus' name.
That's right.
And so I just want to celebrate all the people who sacrificed their Saturday morning at Connection Church. And
for longer than they anticipated, probably.
And just served with excellence and joy. It was just awesome.
Yeah. And then in the afternoon, my parents spent most of the afternoon swiping through all of the photos and just remembering the kids. They started off the morning with prayer for the event and prayer for the families. Just a cool thing. We did have a pretty intense line for most of the day.
Yes.
And I was talking to someone yesterday in the Connection Cafe who had an idea of how we could manage that line next year.
It was about a 90-minute line.
It was.
Yes.
And the idea was we could have 2 opportunities for photos that people could choose from. One with photos with Santa and the other with photos with church guy.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I only shared in the third service yesterday the reward for coming to the third service. I shared during the third service that my 4-year-old son Ezra called me last week the church guy, and so which was fascinating to me. I go by Dad at home, but he called me the church guy, and so I'm willing to take as many pictures as needed, especially to diffuse the line. Like, could you just imagine, like, hey, anyone here not want to wait in the line and just get a picture with our lead pastor? And it's like everyone's like, not at all. No. Not even a little bit.
Oh, that's hilarious. But we are talking about honoring your parents.
Yeah, not your pastor. Yes.
Yeah, yes, and one of the ways we do that is by calling our parents by their, where they work and guy.
Yes.
Oh, it's metal fabrication guy. It's chef guy.
Yes, but we did talk about the 5th commandment yesterday, Dan.
That's right. So one of the features of this podcast that many people don't know about is you can actually submit questions on our website. So if you go to cometoconnect.com, there's a little area for the second look, and you can leave us a question. And someone left us a question, a voice question.
Wow, the third one in 3 years.
Yes.
Great.
And I think one or two of those were jokes before.
Yeah, this might be the first serious question we've received.
So here is the question that we received.
Hi, Pastors Joe and Dan. Longtime listener, first time caller. I found yesterday's sermon to be highly relevant to this Advent season. How do we honor our parents when we live far away and also desire to be faithful to our local church and community? That is, how do we ensure that we aren't neglecting either? Love your podcast, and thanks for all that you do.
Wow, that's what it's like to get a real question. That's a really
Yeah.
wonderful question. And thank you so much for those kind words at the end of it. You're welcome. We're always shocked that we're helping people. And we really do take this seriously, even though we joke. And so I would just say to the person asking the question, I actually, and you know what it's like to live far from our parents.
Yeah.
I grew up in Buffalo, New York. You grew up in Wilbraham, Massachusetts. Our parents both still live there. We live in Pottstown, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So I'm 400 miles from my parents, Dan.
260 miles.
260 miles. And we work every weekend.
Yeah.
So we actually don't get to see our parents much unless they come to us. I make 2 trips home a year to Buffalo, once in the summer and once after Christmas. So we're getting ready to go to Buffalo. We'll go December 27th this year. And I only just say that to say that I know what it's like to have parents who are far away. And I want to say a couple things about this question because I think it's incredibly important. Number one, honoring our parents doesn't mean we need to live next door. We need to obey God. That's actually comes before honoring our parents. But we can still honor our parents when we live far away. In fact, I'm thinking of most of our pastoral staff lives far from their parents.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we still want to make time for them. And so we do make the trip. And, right now I'm in a season with my mom and dad where they're still, they're in their, my mom's going to turn 70 next year and my dad is already in his 70s. There's going to come a point where they can't drive down to see us anymore. And so
Right.
we're going to have to make more frequent trips. So here's what I would say practically. I would say stay in touch as much as you can. And if it comes to the point where your parents need acute care, meaning they need everyday ongoing care, I'm not saying you have to do this. I do think it's an important thing to ask. Is it time to relocate? And again, that's a huge question. But I'm planning to be at Connection Church for my whole career, so to speak. I love this church. I'm committed to this church. Who knows what God's going to do with my life? But at the same time, if one or both of my parents needed care, that would be a time where we may consider moving back to Buffalo. And I'm not saying I'm definitely going to do that, but I've had that conversation. I've had that conversation with my sisters. What is it going to look like to care for our parents as they age? And then not neglecting your local church community. I would say that, yes, we should prioritize in our lives having fellowship with our church. But I think the circumstances of each family is different. So the principles apply here. We give our time to our local church, we prioritize that, and we honor our parents. And sometimes the question is, well, which one is more important? And then I would say it depends what season you're in and what you sense the Lord is asking you to prioritize. And that's why we need discernment. And so if there's specific circumstances that we need to navigate, I think it's important to have godly people in our lives who help us dive into the details and say, okay, what is God calling you to do in this season and in this situation? So I can't actually give a blanket answer, but I think we need to make sure we're maintaining, here are godly principles. We honor our parents always, and we're faithful to our local church always. When those come in conflict with one another, that's when we need to discern what the Spirit is asking us to do.
That's so good, Joe. And I think that concept of seasonality to our lives. I mean, we experience seasons in the year and we experience seasons in our lives. And you kind of brought some of those themes out in the message yesterday about honoring your parents. Specifically, obedience is for a time. Honor is for a lifetime, right? There is a season where we are obedient to our parents, and that is a way that we honor them. But the honor season is much longer. It's actually forever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think a really important question that I didn't address yesterday, and I think this is another question that we get confused about as a culture, which is, how long do I have to obey my parents?
This is good.
Yeah, and because I think everyone's kind of knee-jerk reaction to that question is until you're 18. And I would say, really? So you could be 19, living at home
Right.
in college. Your parents are providing everything for you. You're living underneath their roof, but you no longer have to obey them anymore because you're 19. So I would say, just as a general principle, until you are self-sufficient and independent, you should make it a point to honor your parents' house rules. And so I would say to everyone who's still living at home, whether you're 17 or whether you're 22, it is important that you would honor your parents' house rules. Now, if those become onerous and you're 22 and it's like, I'm not allowed to stay out past 8:30, okay. Like, again, that's why we need discernment. But as long as our parents are supporting us and providing for us, we need to have a heart of honor. And if we're living under their roof, we need to come under their leadership because it's their house.
Yeah.
And we need to honor them. And this is a weird situation, but I think this happens a lot. I think Christian parents sometimes have kids who aren't sure where they're going to be in their faith. And they go off to college and they're not sure where they're at with Jesus. And then they bring their boyfriend or their girlfriend home and they want to sleep in the same bed at the parents' house. And I would just say, you dishonor your parents if you insist on things like that. Like, hey, I just met so-and-so and they're coming back with me and, they're going to come for the holidays and yeah, we're going to stay in my room. It's like, hey, listen, Christian parents, you can require your kids to honor your house rules no matter their age.
Yeah.
Because that's actually dishonoring to act in a way that displeases your parents in their home. And this is where we need to cultivate that heart of honor towards our parents, regardless of our age.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on some of those things. Like we can be, especially if it's the home of your youth,
Yep.
you feel ownership in that space.
Yep.
Even though you don't actually have ownership in that space.
Absolutely.
Right? It is your parents. It's always been your parents' house.
Right.
But our comfortability, and we might, as we have kids, we might have different house rules, and I'm not talking about that one specifically, but other house rules that, or the way that we operate our life and family that differs for one reason or another, how our parents prefer to operate their lives. Yet part of that honor is kind of eschewing our own preferences or the way that we do things and saying, even to our kids, like, hey, my kid, Mimi and Poppy like this,
Yeah.
or we're not going to do that here. We're
Right.
going to honor them when
Right.
we're in their space.
And that's just, that comes from the heart.
Yeah.
Like, I recognize this is your domain
Yeah.
or the domain that God has given you. And when we're here, we're not going to do whatever we want. We're going to try to honor what you want. Now, there does come a point where we need to be honest if we're just living to please our parents in a way
That's good.
that it's impossible to please them, because that situation happens too. And then we get into our adult life and we're all of a sudden find ourselves in front of a therapist. Like, I couldn't figure out how to please my parents.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's what Paul means when he says to fathers in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, fathers, don't exasperate your children.
Right.
And I think what he means by that is, as fathers, don't make it confusing for your kids about how to please you. Like, don't make the rules so intense that you're just always unhappy with them, because that kind of thing, like, that overwhelms a child. And so as parents, we need to be asking ourselves, and I would say whether you're a parent of a 30-year-old or a 3-year-old, you need to ask a very important question. Not like you, Dan. We all do.
I'm
Dan,
I'm
you
preparing
need
to ask myself the
I'm,
question.
like, intensely saying this to you, like I'm confronting you right now. No, we all need to ask ourselves the question as parents is, am I making it difficult for the people in my life to meet my expectations? Because if that's what's happening, you're actually becoming a person that's becoming harder to honor. So we actually can join with our children to say, how can we help them honor us and honor God at the same time? Because sometimes our standards are so exacting that we're just never happy, and then we're exhausting the people in our life.
I'm going to go apologize to my kids now.
Yeah,
Thank you, Joe.
All right, is this the end? No,
No.
we're just into it. Okay.
One of the things that you mentioned yesterday, and I want to kind of get into some of those edge cases, right? We're talking right now about parents, whether they live close or they live far away, with whom we have pretty good relationship, who we see often, who are maybe basically in congruence with the same belief set, but it's hard.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of very difficult circumstances. I mean, you talk about parents, people ending up in therapy because their parents were hard to please. And there are a lot of other things with our parents that would lead us to need to seek help in dealing with very traumatic circumstances, whether it's the loss of a parent or an abusive parent or many, many things in between. But one of the things that you mentioned yesterday was our experiences don't nullify God's commands, right? So even in those edge cases, we still have this command to honor our parents.
Yeah, and so I think what an important word for us in so many different circumstances. Our experiences don't cancel God's commands. But I had a conversation with a gentleman that I had just met yesterday after the third service, and he was just asking me, he's like, my dad left when I was real young. My mom wasn't a great mom. She was not really there for us. And now I kind of have this strained relationship with my mom, and I don't even know where my dad is. I haven't seen him in years. And it's like, how do I honor them? And I just think, I can't imagine what it's like. Like, that is a very difficult situation. That's painful. And we just talked about how the things that we're called to honor, that list may be very short for some of us.
Yeah.
It may begin and end with, I honor them for bringing me into the world. And that's actually, and I remember the gentleman who started our church, a very close friend of mine, a friend of yours, Daniel McNaughton, he used to talk about this thing, and I remember him saying clearly, sometimes the only thing to honor is that our parents gave us life.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that as a very young man and a very young minister, and I'm like, wow, that's something I never thought of, because I come from a good family, not a family without faults or flaws, but I love my mom and dad. I mean, they're coming this weekend. I can't wait to see them, and everything's not perfect, but it's like there's a lot to honor about my mom and dad. But then you think about this guy who we talked about at the end of the third service, and I can just think, when I was preaching yesterday, I saw people who had lost both their parents.
Yeah.
I saw people who were elderly, whose parents have probably been long gone. I saw people whose parents have been divorced. I saw kids whose parents are in the midst of divorce. And I just think, man, this is such a dynamic situation. So this is where we need to hang on to the principle of God's word. And it's really, and this is what I think we need to do. We need to get with God, and we need to say, God, I want to honor my parents. You know how hard this is for me. Help me to see the things that I can honor them for. And let's be so clear. Honor doesn't negate their failures. It doesn't blur over their
doesn't
failures.
Erase them, right?
In the same way that we honor our political leaders. Like, whether or not you agree with everything President Biden has done, or President Trump has done, or President Obama has done, all the way down the line, we honor them because of their position and their authority. Through our honor, we're not saying, and we also agree with everything you say and do. Of course, that's not true, but it's about our hearts. And the same is true with our parents. Honor doesn't blur where they failed us, but it's the starting place of health in our own hearts to say, these people, because of the office they hold in my life, I honor them, I respect them, I dignify their role in my life, even if they didn't live their life with a lot of dignity.
Yeah.
And this is what keeps us spiritually whole and healthy, Dan. This is what keeps bitterness out of our hearts. This is actually what allows us to heal and mature and grow and become gracious and pliable and winsome and kind and gentle and genuine. When we have this kind of heart and this disposition towards the authority figures in our life, like, we thrive under God's authority when we honor authority in our life. Because here's what a lot of us actually are trying to accomplish. Yeah, I want to honor God with my life, but I'm not going to honor any of the authority. And that's just called made up Christianity.
Yeah.
We're just making it up. It's like inventing another alternative universe with God. But God has said, this is how life works. You honor authority, and then by honoring the authority, you honor me. And it doesn't mean we obey our authorities if they ask us to sin against God. But we can still have a heart of honor. I mean, so that's what we need to understand, this whole idea. Like, we need discernment to know what principles there are. So we can have it, and you think about when the apostles wrote about honor, especially honoring our governing authorities, they were living under people like Caligula and Nero, who were literally crucifying people for fun, crucifying Christians for fun under the reign of Nero, when Peter wrote to honor the king.
Wow.
So that's why our experiences don't nullify the commands of God.
Joe, I just want to go on record honoring your authority today.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
King
Dan.
church guy.
Yeah, king guy. That is not at all what we're talking about, just for the record.
Yeah, well, we're going to take out this little clip.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, we're going to have to put it in the beginning video of church or something.
Like during the Sunday morning video, like when that clip comes up of me preaching, it's just going to underneath it's going to be like King Church Guy. Oh, that's going to be
perfect.
Great. Yeah, people are going to be confused right from the beginning.
Yeah, well, except for the 14 people that watch.
Yeah, most people aren't there for that part anyway.
Well, this has been another episode of The Second Look. You can catch this sermon and much more at our website, cometoconnect.com. Have a great week.